Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree.
The curious want to know.
The Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode. This one, 294? 294 of Third Degree, the podcast. Unfortunately, during warm-ups today, Dan Crooke pulled up with a small niggly injury in his abdominal wall that's been bugging him for the better part of 18 months, and he won't have surgery on it. So filling in his position today is none other than Arman. Hello, Arman. How are you, sir?
I am good. I'm great. I got pulled up to the starting lineup, and I'm not warmed up or anything, so I got my warm-ups in right now.
If you were to be called into a game, would you wear full-size shin guards, or do you use like little sanitary pad napkin type shin guards?
I use a full size because I don't want to get kicked in the shin.
All right.
Like, I'm not a big fan of that at all. So I know a lot of people wear the cardboard on there and stuff like that, but I'm more of I'll wear the full kit, you know? I'll wear like the shin guards and everything. I even did it when we would play like indoor all the time, so I wouldn't wake up with like a sore shin going to work. Like, how embarrassing is that?
It made me think about, I was thinking about shin guards today because The Athletic wrote a literally 1,500-word article on shin guards today, and I thought it was the most athletic article of all time. And there he is, your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer himself, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
I feel like we're the Texas Rangers and we made a quick call down to AAA and grabbed a guy. Get here by 8 so you're in.
Yeah, zoom on a tollway.
Yeah.
You gotta pitch.
Yeah.
You gotta pitch, kid. Bring your sauce. All right, very good. Well, hopefully everything. No, Dan had to go pick up his wife at the airport. Seriously, it's no big deal. So here we go. Lots going on. I think Buzz, I'm pretty certain this time 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were really, really worried this may end up being the most boring offseason of all time. Yet it subsequently has been anything but. Since we last talked, Paul Arriola officially has left and joined Seattle, and he's done he did his own goodbye letter and hello Seattle video and all of that. Alan Velasco is essentially done. Neither club has officially announced it, but it's done. He never got on a plane to even come back to Texas.
Yep.
And we can talk more about that. So there's just a lot going on with potential moves and the new Velasco money, and camp has opened. I don't know where you want to start with all this.
Well, let's start by saying that you're right. 4 or 5 weeks ago, a couple months ago at the end of the season, we talked about how, if they had brought back everybody and they were talking to, the roster was effectively full. And so we questioned, the previous couple of years, they hadn't been super active, but we talked about how they're really going to have to do some things if they want to improve this team. And I wrote a thing about how they needed to clear contracts, and lo and behold, they cleared the ones I talked about. So they set themselves up. Now they've got an even further piece with Allen, and the proof in the long term will be in the pudding of what comes next. I mean, how are you've set yourself up to make radical changes to this team. Can you finish it off and get good pieces? That's the macro level view of what needs to happen next.
Arman, what's your kind of observations about what's happened so far? What do you think Dallas is up to?
Man, it's so interesting because it was slow, and now it's kind of just completely ramped up to a point to where it's teetering on the edge of either a full-blown, I don't know if I'd call it a rebuild, but a blow-up, I mean, depending on what happens with Petter Musa, or it's going to be a retooling of sorts, depending on, again, what happens if they do end up parting ways. You see the rumors. I mean, Buzz, I saw you quote tweet a rumor about Musa and Milan once again. So there's still a lot more to be seen. I mean, we saw the report today that they're interested in Luciano Acosta. I mean, I think a lot of teams in MLS are interested in Luciano Acosta, so I don't think that's mutually exclusive just to Dallas. But they've cleared the books. They've done the things that I think are actually in the best interest of the club. But again, Buzz, I think you said it perfectly. It matters on what happens next, right? Like, we've kind of expected that these moves happening, and we've been kind of acting as if these moves would happen. But what's going to happen next? How are they going to fill these spots? That's the next domino that It needs to be seen before I can make a judgment call on anything that happens.
Yeah, that's all fair. And the other thing that happened this week is that we got an announcement from the league about some of the roster rule changes. And the one that really stuck out to me, because it was the one that really began to solidify the idea that some of this or all of this may or may not be tied to the fact that they're about to have a big revenue cut for the next 3 years, was the announcement that GAM no longer expires. So Clark Hunt could hoard all of this GAM for as long as he wants to. Not all of it, but most of it, and not have to spend it until he's got a shiny new stadium. Now, I know that's really pessimistic and probably not the likely outcome, but that is certainly a new piece to the entire puzzle, is it not, Buzz?
Oh, absolutely. And most of these rules are fascinating and going to alter the landscape. That rule specifically, and we talked about this when Arman joined us a couple of weeks ago. Dallas acquired so much GAM for 2025 that it would have been very difficult for them to spend it all. So that actually is a beautiful rule for them, because now they can carry some of it forward. And it doesn't even carry it forward in the sense of like, oh, we're going to save money for the future. It's we don't want to, we no longer now will lose it, because it'll be impossible for us to spend it all this year, because they only have a limited number of roster mechanics to fill. Now, Velasco being gone gives them another one, but that doesn't change the fact that it would have been tough to spend that just immense pile of GAM they got going.
Well, now, Arman, you and I were having a conversation about the fact that I do think there is a certain subset of the fan base, and trust me, I totally get this, because all of these rules are super goofy and stupid, but there's a particular type of GAM that isn't just fake monopoly money made out of nothing. It is actually owners having to spend their own cash, and they don't have to spend it. Now, we don't know how much of that GAM exists for Clark Hunt, but there was always this possibility that Clark may not spend all of the GAM because it's money he has to spend. Am I getting that correct?
Correct. So when Dallas switched to 2+4 model, the 2 designated players and 4 U22 players, what happens is you get $2 million of discretionary GAM. Now, all money that's discretionary in MLS, I think TAM is all discretionary, comes from the owner's budget. That doesn't come from the MLS pool. That comes from the owner's budget. And I think also, I mean, if you think about it in the same vein of like the transfer revenue thing, that also comes from the owner's budget technically, because it's from that transfer revenue to a degree. So maybe not really, but essentially that $2 million doesn't need to be spent. It could be spent up to $2 million. And we saw with the potential, you could change your roster construction midway, etc. They don't need to spend they don't have to spend that $2 million, but if they were to utilize it, they have to spend it in that year. That's the only GAM that doesn't expire, that $2 million you get from switching to the 2+4 model. So all in all, I mean, just to kind of talk about the non-expiring GAM, like it changes the roster dynamic, like building for the entire league, because now I think you can almost have NBA style building where you're building across multiple years if you do it right. Now, am I saying FC Dallas is going to do that? No, but there's definitely another possibility that they can embrace maybe a slower build, maybe play some homegrowns, get some more experience for guys, and then maybe build for a bigger year, some year down the line or something like that. That's a possibility now, because it's not use it or lose it anymore.
Now, Arman, I think it was Arman a few minutes ago, mentioned that Dallas was in on Acosta from Cincinnati, who apparently is out on the marketplace. So is Evander from Portland, for various reasons I'm a little foggy on. But tied to that is the other announcement that we got this week, that a rumor that's been floating around, I think Bogert started this, saying this was going to happen, did happen, is the fact that the league now has pure cash transfer fees, and that if in fact Dallas is interested in pursuing Acosta or Evander, it would be under that type of deal where Clark Hunt actually just sends Cincinnati X amount of dollars in cash.
Right. So effectively, this allows you to buy a player inside the league the way you would buy a player outside the league for money. And now the league calls it a cash trade, but it's effectively the same thing. So this allows you to go to a team in the league, and you're looking at two guys who are a little bit different. One of them's sort of 26 and maybe might cost you upwards of 15 million, perhaps. The other one's 30 years old and might be more like a $10 million player. Both those numbers are not usually the kind of numbers we see floating around from the hunts. So you have to ask yourself, why would they be willing to do that? And the answer is risk reward, because these are two players that have been in your league and produced at a super high level in your league, an MVP style level in your league. So you know that they can do it, as opposed to when you buy a player from another country, you maybe don't know 100% about that league they're in or that team they're in or what really got them to be the way they were. So there's a confidence level when you're going to buy a player from inside the league. Now, whether you think these players are of the caliber or that's worth the cost or not, that's a calculation at the end of the day. It's hard to swallow. And again, this kind of money, I'm not 100% sure is Hunt level of spend. How badly do those teams want to sell those players who have stated that they're leaving? Like Acosta wants to leave Cincinnati. Evander wants to go play back in Brazil because he wants to get in the Brazilian national team. Can you sell those guys that Dallas is the answer? Will the price be lower than maybe the market because those players so desperately want out? At the end of the day, though, remember what the Hunt and the FC Dallas DNA is. So I actually have some other ideas that might be really kind of interesting that fall, for me, more in line with the way the Hunts think.
Okay.
Well, what if you could perhaps buy a player that was more like a U22 player? What if you could go to Real Salt Lake, for example, and buy Diego Luna for like maybe $5 million, who they just signed to a U22 contract, and therefore that wouldn't count on your cap?
What are you saying, that they can't do that now, or that is part of the design of this new rule? They could do that.
You could do that. You can buy anybody. So why do you have to necessarily buy a DP who's 30 or 20 or 27 and costs you 15 million? Why can't you buy like an up and coming player? A U20? Dallas just shifted to the 4U22 model. Maybe like one of these young, exciting MLS playmakers who might like to get paid a little bit more money, perhaps, than they're getting paid, perhaps. It's hard to say. I'm just saying that, like, which one feels more like the Hunts and their return to their club DNA, going after a young 21, 22-year-old playmaker, or going after the 30-year-old guy for $10 million?
Right. Okay. So this is actually an interesting topic, because inside your Discord, I saw a lot of the curious really celebrating this news that they would be pursuing Acosta. And let's just, for the sake of argument, say it's a real deal, that they actually have made the call and expressed that they're willing to put in X amount of dollars to buy him and bring him to Dallas. It seems we all need to remember, at least my opinion is, the only reason why they're even in this discussion is because Clark Hunt has $10 million cash in his pocket from the Velasco sale. This isn't a purchase they wouldn't even thought about doing it had they not sold somebody and had cash to spend. And I think that is the difference in ambition to me, is you're essentially replacing a player. You're buying a player to replace a player you lost. That's good. I'm not criticizing the fact that they're doing it. I just don't want anybody to confuse it with some sort of new showing of ambition.
Yeah, I think in this particular case, you're right. $10 million for Velasco with $2 million in add-ons and a 15% sell-on, which is a phenomenal amount of money for Velasco. That Dallas is now stuck. By all discussion and points that people that we know, the ideal with this year was to try and bring Allen inside, playing as a 10. Because like everyone now, you'll notice in all the media, everyone talks about replacing Velasco. They talk about getting a 10, not a winger.
Right.
So like this is definitely, and it's a real bonus for FC Dallas that this new rule has opened and given them a second avenue to fill a DP spot. And they have all this money they just got. So if you could get a player for less than you just sold Allen for, which is why it's probably not likely that it would be Evander and more likely that it would be Acosta, then you're doing good business. Now, it's probably easier and faster to use this inside the league version than it is to go out and about and scout and find a player and figure out what his out is on his current team and all those kinds of things. This is much, much simpler to do it this way. But I still can't help but think, is buying a 30-year-old DP for $10 million. Is that, forget the new rule. Just think about that in terms of FC Dallas, 30-year-old, $10 million for a 10. Have they done that kind of business? Musa's relatively young. Velasco's really young, right? When was the last time they spent huge on a 30-year-old? That doesn't feel like FC Dallas to me. So I wonder if...
Well, his name was Frank O'Hara.
Yeah. Well, and they waited for the free on him, didn't they? Remember, they waited like an extra 6 months for his contract to be up.
Yeah.
And even like we joked about Dan Hunt fell in love with him in the CONCACAF Champions League, and it's like, oh, we'll get that guy someday. Put on your big boy pants and put in a bid, right? That's not how they kind of do things. So I question whether, I know they have an open DP spot, but I question whether getting Acosta, which sounds cool, is what they do now or ever, really.
Yeah. Before I move, I want to discuss the whole Velasco move a little bit more, but I'm interested in Arman's thoughts about the money part of this and the numbers, and whether or not you think Acosta is like is there any reality to the idea that Acosta is going to come play in Dallas?
Well, there's a couple of things that the Cincinnati media mentioned. And again, I think this kind of just depends on what they do with Musa, because the reason why Acosta wants to leave, I think part of it was to go to Argentina, but part of it, according to what Lauren, I can't remember what her last name is, but she's a great reporter for Cincinnati. She mentioned how Acosta was upset at the way that the roster build in Cincinnati was going on, and that he wasn't able to have a high profile forward in front of him. They just acquired Kevin Denke, but it seems like there's something else involved that made Acosta upset and want to go. They upset about the roster build or anything. If they got any of those two guys, especially Evander, I think Evander's incredible. I think he was up there with MLS MVP last year. He'd be an amazing signing. I think it's a little bit above the budget range, but Acosta is also a very good, incredible player. I'm just in two minds, because it seems like there is some sort of relative interest in Musa from some club out there. If, again, you have to stay firm and say, we're not going to sell this guy if we're going to bring in a guy like Lucho Acosta or Evander, because that's the statement of intent to win now, right? If you're going to spend that big of money, like, that's a very big statement of, we want to win now. We have the guys. If you sell Musa, I feel like you're kind of back at, okay, we need one more piece to fill in this gap and go from there. But, like, you know what I mean?
Well, I was just going to throw in that Acosta also is under contract through 26 with a 27 option, but his base salary is $2.9 million and combined comp is $4.2 million. Does that sound like the Hunts?
No.
So, there's a lot here that, like, while you on surface you go, oh yeah, no brainer, Dallas needs a 10, boom. I don't know, man. None of this stuff matches the club DNA and the Hunt profile, right? So I'm not, even though we have sources that have said they called about him and some that didn't, I don't buy that they really think this is the answer. They may do it to do their due diligence so they can say to everybody, hey, we tried to get him, but it was too expensive. But I don't know. This doesn't feel right to me. Luciano Acosta doesn't.
Well, part of the cash trade thing that's interesting to me is that it is the first time the league has allowed the clubs to do something that it has tried to avoid for the entirety of its existence, which is having clubs bid against each other. And so you can see an arms race happening for, let's say, 2 or 3 clubs that are in for either one of those guys, saying, hey, Dallas will give you 9, name another club will give you 11, and then somebody says, I'll give you 15, and you could see how quickly that could accelerate.
Well, big picture, this will open the door for rich clubs to buy players from poor clubs all the time, and you'll see certain clubs become bottom clubs all the time and allow your LAFCs or your Seattles or your Atlantas, your Torontos, guys with big cash funds to be up top more.
Yeah, I guess part of it is, what can clubs then do with the cash that they get in hand? I mean, how do they convert? Does that just get converted into salary or transfer fees from outside the league?
You can convert $3 million of it just like you can any other sale
into
that you make. Yeah.
So the thing that's interesting me about all this is this whole discussion that we've been having for the last few weeks about what in the world is the plan? What is going on? You've traded away Jesus and Paul to Seattle. You've signed 3 or 4 guys. Your mileage may vary on whether or not they are, I mean, they may be improvements, over the people that they replaced, Abubakar for Omar Gonzalez, for example, or Shaq is better than Tuamasi was, that kind of thing. But none of those guys is necessarily making this team into a competitor. So now they've, we've been told that the Velasco sale ultimately ended up being a surprise to them, that they thought by signing Velasco to this new contract, that would put that whole thing to bed, at least for a season. But lo and behold, Boca comes back and says, you know what, we'll give you way too much money plus other stuff for you guys to sell this guy. Now they're stuck without a 10.
Yeah.
And they've got a season starting in a few weeks. And this is where I think this becomes really an interesting conversation about ambition. Gam can now be hoarded for a period of time. Did they have anybody in mind to replace Velasco? How this season starts, I think, really is going to be a big tell on whether or not they got their shit together in terms of roster construction.
Yeah, you remember when we went into the winter, Zanata talked about how they were pretty happy with their offense, how excited he was to see Jesus and Velasco passing to Musa, which may or may not be true, but that he felt that way. But the big thing was we need to improve our defense. Our offense is pretty good. We're happy with our offense. We got to improve our defense. So lo and behold, they end up selling Jesus, and I think that's okay because you have other pieces that are playing just as well. The surprise shocker of Velasco going makes you in a panic mode of, okay, I got to replace that to keep my offense up to par. But we have yet to really see the improvement on the defense that was the stated goal. Like, I think Shatmore's an upgrade over Juan. I think that Abubakar is a good depth piece to add into your rotation, but I don't think that they've had a real answer yet at center back, and you've lost Sam Junka at left back. So you still have some work to do to actually make this defense better, which was your stated goal going into the season. So much so that Nico Estevez was talking about then finally agreeing and admitting they needed a center back in February, and they tried to get one in the summer, and it went south on the physical. So there's a whole lot out there that they haven't done yet. So pay off the improving the defense yet? No, we need to see some more there. And now you've added a new creation of, I got to now replace Velasco, which stinks. But again, we buy the business. We buy that value being over what he probably was worth to the club. So, they created a problem, but that I can live with for now. And the other problem they have not solved at all.
Well, and the reason why I bring all this up, Buzz, is to kind of answer the question you're asking, which is an Acosta really the right kind of solution for this problem because of his age, because of the cost, all of those things, and because of what is about to transpire in terms of of kind of a larger rebuild overall? Would they not be smarter to not spend as much money and maybe try to go get a lesser expensive player, younger player that's more of a long-term potential? Because
that's why I threw out that U22 idea of someone like a Diego Luna.
Yeah, that's why. You and I are saying we're on the same page. So, but what my point is that the high wire act I think the club is in is you've sold Jesus, you sold Paul, the face of the club, a fan favorite. Now you've lost Velasco, which was this, great Argentinian Messi light that you guys spent all this money on and hyped up to no end. Now what you got none of those pieces. So the high wire act I think they've put themselves into, guys, is fan expectation. How are you guys going to make this a better team in 2025 than the team that missed the playoffs in 2024? And I'm not convinced they're anywhere close to accomplishing that at this point. And that's where I think the question of, well, we could get Acosta, but do we really want to spend that kind of money is where that really becomes an interesting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that in the end of the day, do you have faith that they're going to deliver the talent? Now, the problem with Velasco is they probably thought that they were locking Velasco up long term. And so they're probably a tiny bit surprised. Now, you should have done your due diligence all along and had some ideas on paper, at least, about what you were going to do if this happened. So we're going to have to see how quickly they can reset. Again, this new rule lets them try some new things inside the league that maybe they wouldn't have had options before. But it's not going to surprise me to see them sit on this Velasco situation until midseason if they can't do a deal inside the league, because it probably will be very difficult to really quickly have something lined up for this next window. And they have yet to deliver on the defense. Now, again, the window doesn't open until January 31st. So this team is really good about keeping things secret unless it comes from outside the league until they get it passing through the league office, and then Bogert hears about it, and then we set all out. But it may be a while before we begin to hear some names. Arman, what do you feel about this whole go for Acosta versus maybe like a younger kind of player?
Well, if Luciano Acosta is available, and again, the idea is to win now. If we're thinking from a club perspective, we want to win MLS Cup, that's the best option to go with. If you want to win MLS Cup, that's the best option. When it comes to how I feel about the club, the development, what their idea is, I'm a bit confused now, because there was a clear statement from Dan and Co. to kind of go back to the roots, right? To kind of go back to the things. They've kind of made that a thing. They went back. Remember, they hired Eric Quill, a guy they have familiarity with. Nico was the first hire they didn't have familiarity with. They went back and hired Eric Quill, which is more of a hunt line of, I would say, hiring. Then you go down. They've got a bunch of homegrowns as well too that they signed to deals and stuff. The signing of Acosta goes away from that if that happens. It more is in line of this kind of what was going on under Nico, which was a lot more veteran heavy. To me, I'm a little confused at what the club philosophy is. If the club philosophy is to go back to the roots and go back to younger players' development, etc., the Costa signing doesn't line up with that thinking. But if it's more of we want to win, we don't care, etc., then the Acosta line makes sense. And guys, he's an incredible player. If he's available for the right price, I mean, I think any team should go for him. But what's the club philosophy? I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm very confused.
Well, I think the Velasco thing has caught them all off guard, which is a thing unto itself. Like that's a whole different conversation. Look, I'm an old guy. I'm an old guy that's been here since day one and been waiting for 30 years for them to win MLS Cup. If Acosta's available and can play 10 for this team, I don't care if he costs you $20 million. Go get him. He's a near MLS winning. He's an MLS MVP type player. I would love to see him on this team. But I think there's an absolute zero chance he's going to end up playing here. One, I don't think he would want to come play in Dallas because I don't think the roster is up to his snuff. And two, I don't think Clark Hunt's going to throw out that kind of money for him, even if he has it in his pocket, because of the salary part, not necessarily the transfer fee part. It's that giant salary that I think, Buzz, to your point, is what freaks them out about that.
I totally agree. 100%. Yep.
Which then begs the question, because this is why this whole conversation is so fascinating. Buzz, to your point, before the season started, they said their big thing was fixing the defense, but now they've got a giant problem in offense.
They do.
The whole thing is really, in some ways it's okay because you anticipated some of it with the Jesus and Paul thing, but with the Arriola move, now I think the whole thing's a real question as to how this season's going to play out. They got a lot to fix.
I think I will give them credit. Like, I think that the moves that they have made to this point, I think these moves align with the new coach and the new way he's going to want to play. So they've done some baseline tweaking that I think will be beneficial. You have to pay off this idea that you need to improve the defense. And then you're right, Peter. The real question is the 10. Like, I think you can go into the season with like a combination of Sebastian Lletget, Patrick Delgado, a buy that actually really surprised me, and maybe some of these other young pieces. I think you can go into this season with some 10s that can work. Now, none of that makes you feel like I'm going after MLS Cup. But when you have a brand new coach, the goal probably isn't MLS Cup in year one. The goal is going to be make the playoffs again, and that's the idea. When you buy a player like Velasco, for example, in the first place, you bought him at such a young age. You knew you weren't buying him for the first season. You were buying him for a couple of years down the road, in this case, to sell. But that's the same sort of way. Like, if you're a team that's in a rebuild mode, just paying, as you said, Peter, all that money for a 10 who's 30 in 3 years when he's 33, is he going to be worth that money when you're hopefully peaking under your new coach? That's why, to me, like, I totally get like a 1 season, 1 shot. Acosta would be awesome. But like in the FC Dallas scheme of things and the current state of the team, I think it makes no sense at all. I think it's far more likely to see them double down on this new young DNA, and that includes foreign players and domestic, to go for another young 10, if it's from another foreign country or if it's in the league. That's where I think Dallas's head will be, because I almost guarantee you they're not thinking this is our year in 2025 when they're just doing a complete rebuild. And right now we haven't even seen the defense part at all. So we don't know if it's going to be good.
Yeah, and nobody blames them for selling Velasco for what they sold him for.
No, that was a steal.
And while it would completely exacerbate this exact problem, nobody would blame them for selling Musa for $22 million to whoever wants to spend that amount of money for him and lose him after 1 season. But man, you can sell him and make all that money, but man, now you're really running dry.
Because how much faith you have in Logan Farrington.
Okay, but now you're one hamstring or injury away from being without anything.
Yeah, but if you're the committee and you believe Farrington's a 15 to 18 goal scorer in this league as a 9, it's the exact same scenario as when I said that Farrington was a better winger and he makes Jesus surplus. Well, then they go out and they get a Chu and they get an Anderson Julio, both of whom are wingers. Okay, maybe they really do look at Logan Farrington as a 9 and really do think he's the answer. And maybe they really will be willing to sell Petter Musa for $22 million because they're going to be fine with Logan Farrington. You're going to rebuild anyway, right? You're already in a complete meltdown because you can't hit no D yet and Velasco's gone. Why not pull the trigger and do it? So, it's a bit right now until we get some answers, until they show us some of their cards. We're going to do a lot of this kind of speculating and spitballing and coming up with ideas. But, at the end of the day, eventually they're going to have to lay this hand down and show us what they have. And, they'll either cash all in or they'll win the pot or whatever.
Yeah. Hey, Arman, do you think I'm just flat out? Here's the question. Do you believe that when they start the season in February, they will have signed a clear and defined Alan Velasco replacement, whether it be Acosta or somebody else? Do you think they'll say, we went out and used the money to go get this dude?
I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm actually going to, will he play the first games we're asking, or if they've signed someone?
Well, if they sign somebody.
Man, I think they actually might pull a trigger on somebody. I think, again, and this is me thinking best case, like thinking optimistically about the club, as in,
good for you.
As in they had something, you should have a list already signed up, ready to go with this. They should be already going through their contacts, going through their channels. They should have already moved on this and etc. But so I'm gonna go with yes, but in my opinion, they should wait.
You think they will, but you think they should wait. Okay.
I think they should wait until the summer window and capitalize on that and the bigger window, a bigger opportunity to do so, and also more time. There's no rush. Like, again, no one's expecting FC Dallas to compete for MLS Cup, respectfully. Like, there's not that many teams competing for MLS Cup in general to begin with. But if you wait and make the proper decision instead of, going through a quick decision process, I think that is going to bode a lot better for the long-term future of the club, especially guys. And I'm just throwing this out there, especially if there's a potential schedule change, right? No one's going to care about if there's a potential schedule change, that throws a wrinkle in almost everything. And this 2021 season, okay, whatever, gear up for the big boom. If the schedule change happens and there's a 2026, 2027 season that starts after the World Cup. That's just my thought.
Okay. Buzz?
Yeah, I'm at about 25-30% that they can pull off something inside the league. And then if they can't, I'm with Arman. I think that they probably were caught off guard by this. I would imagine, I believe that the feelers that they have had out were more about down the line. They probably felt like maybe more likely it was the summer where these bids might come in for people, and then or they would have the ability to go out and get a this or that or whatever. So I kind of agree with Arman that you wait, or that they're going to wait, unless something perfect fit, not Luciano Acosta, perfect fit falls in their lap in terms of inside the league. But I think that's a 1 in 4 shot that happens at best.
Buzz, once they have this $10 million in hand and they could do a cash trade with any willing team in the league, I'm making you now the person getting to make the decision. If for $10 million, you could go spend that money on a player that you think a club would reasonably be willing to sell for $10 million. Like, don't tell me Messi or Busquets. Okay. Who would you go buy?
Yeah. Well, how much do you think Puig would cost?
Oh, way more than 10 million.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting him.
You think it's more than 10 million? I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I hadn't really anticipated that kind of question. I'm not joking. Like, when I've thought of the Diego Luna thing, I wasn't joking about that. Like, that's a fantastic young player that you could plop right into the middle. You know, he played for El Paso at one point, so he's familiar with Texas. You know, the price wouldn't be more than 10 million,
wouldn't it?
The price would be less.
Oh, you think?
Oh, yeah, I think so. He's a U22 initiative player. Yeah. He only gets paid a couple $100,000. He's not even a full-time starter for them. You know, I'm basing my interest in him and what I think he'll grow into. Yeah. You know, that to me is a better fit. Like a guy where Quill can say, "You're my 10, and you're gonna play for 3 seasons in this spot and grow into this spot. And by the time you're 25, 26, we're gonna be peaking." You know, that's what to me is interesting. And I didn't look beyond the one example that I wanted to draw up to show this, that what I think is more likely the kind of FC Dallas move, this going for a young guy like that. You know, beyond Diego Luna, I didn't come up with another example because I just wanted to talk about it. But, you know, the club doesn't have, I don't think they don't have a young guy that's close. The closest profile in terms of the young players they've signed is Anthony Ramirez. He's the closest to this profile they're looking for in this position. But Anthony's 18, so he's not, you know, 3 years from being the guy. He'd only be 21 at that point. Diego Garcia, who's a phenomenal player, also just 18, or he actually may be 19 now. But again, he's an 8 and not a 10. So there's not an academy profile guy hanging around that fits this description. These are the positions where ordinarily people spend just absolute boatloads of money, with some rare examples of an American player that can come through that can play this spot. You know, the guys that eventually become crazy money. So that would be why, if you're willing to pay for a young American in this spot, it's because eventually you think they're going to be, you know, in the Pulisic conversation. It's not going to be Pulisic, but, you know, or they wouldn't be in MLS. So, you know, the other kind of answer would be to do something like try and go get Gio Reyna, you know, if not him specifically, a player that is undervalued perhaps because they're not getting, you know, a lot of love with their team. Those are the kinds of players you're looking at, whether it be inside the league or outside the league.
Okay. Arman, you got $10 million to spend in the league. Who you buying?
Well, it's funny. I was on another Discord. Sorry, I have to cheat in the third degree Discord for a little bit.
So wrong.
But I was on another Discord, and they were like, why doesn't Dallas go after Pedro de la Vega? Because apparently Seattle fans absolutely just are not a big fan of him. He's a young DP. They spent big money on him. I don't know if he'd be worth $10 million, but he has had some injury issues. But I mean, that's just a fun name. He's a fun, dynamic little player. He played in the wing for a bit. I'm maybe he could play on the inside. I don't know if Seattle would even do that or anything. But I mean, if we're doing a hypothetical game, that's one name that definitely popped up for me. I mean, Buzz, I really like your Diego Luna shout. I just don't know if Arsenal would sell him in the league. Yep. And for $5 billion, I think they might probably just keep him certainly in the end. Yeah. Because he's incredible. But I mean, it's so hard. It's because within the league, there's only like a couple options. I mean, out of those two, the two names are listed, Evander and Lucho. I would rather spend the $15 million on Evander than the $10 million on Lucho. So I think Evander is absolutely incredible and puts you in a great situation.
Totally agree, but that's even more unlike the Hunts to spend $15 million inside. Although he is 26,
exactly,
I think, you know, which is more in line of what we're talking about. A guy who would 3 years from now, as Eric Quill's peaking with his team, would be 29, going on 30 maybe. That makes more sense in terms of building, but that price is really high. And you're talking about a guy who wants to leave not because of, well, partially probably because of the team, but because he wants to be in the Brazilian national team. So he wants a profile team that's going to get him seen and get into the Brazilian national team. I don't know that FC Dallas,
Hey, Andre
Yeah,
can make some
listen,
calls.
Sonata
I
knows
don't know.
people. Don't get me wrong. And their scouting guy, the new scouting guy, Sandro, he has Brazilian connections too. He used to scout for Brazil. So like you could try and sell that maybe and get Evander to come here, and so maybe you could get the price down. But again, like I don't know that like if you're the guy that's like, oh, I want to be playing in that national team, is that a high enough profile to get me seen? And I don't know if it is. That might be part of the problem.
Man, if Clark went out and wrote a check for 15 or whatever the amount is to get Evander, that would completely reorient and recalibrate all of my opinions about Clark Hunt and how he operates this business.
Change everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't mean that in a critical way. I mean, I just feel like I have a really good grasp on how he runs his business, and that doesn't fall in line with that. That would completely.
He doesn't do it with the Chiefs either. That
No.
kind of high price free agent,
No.
sign or buy. They draft people.
No, look, the manner in which Clark Hunt runs his businesses is not a mystery. It's it's literally in like business books and school books and stuff. I mean, it's all pretty straightforward. Bottom line, keep the books as balanced as possible thinking, and that's why that it's all very pie in the sky kind of stuff. Fascinating. I do have a question for both of you guys. I was thinking about this because I was reading a lot of the reactions from Seattle people to Jesus and Paul, and like the amount of love Paul was getting from Seattle fans as an addition.
Yeah.
And it was funny to me, we got the news today that Jesus got sent home from the national team because of fitness issues, and my radar went up because I'm thinking, all right, there's the abdominal wall injury, but then one of the local Seattle blogs was saying, no, it's actually just a fitness thing. And I'm thinking, how is Jesus not fit? Like, it's not like Camp Cupcake is filled with MLS players that have played recently.
Yeah.
And he's the only one that got home for fitness issues. So so the reason why I bring all this up is this kind of thinking that I had, which is, to me, let me ask the question this way, Buzz. If you could have kept Jesus and Paul for the deals Seattle signed both those players for, would you still want them knowing everything you know about their game?
No.
Arman?
Paul, yes. Jesus, no.
Okay, see, this is my point. Seattle seems really like they think they've really stolen a couple of top-notch players, and in my thinking, I'm like, I'm really shocked Seattle came for these two dudes because, frankly, I just don't think they got it anymore. I mean, Paul's a great locker room addition and maybe a good bench player coming off the bench kind of guy, but I don't. Other than that, I just don't. I'm surprised Seattle is as excited as they are about two guys that we didn't want anymore.
Right. So the thing from the Dallas end is that Dallas was a bad team, and they want to get better. And then the way you do that is you get rid of players that don't live up to their salaries. So Paul next season would have been at best like a reserve winger, or maybe not even, maybe a wing back or an outside back, but maybe not even a starting one. He would have been basically a role player, and the money does not match. If you could have brought back Paul on not the deal that he's getting, because remember, he's still getting all his money, not for the cap hit that Seattle's having, which I think is probably going to be roughly around $700K. If I could have had him at 400, then I probably would have said, okay, but it doesn't help you get better. And Jesus is the same thing. Like in terms of getting better, again, they have guys that are producing at a similar level. So yes, you want to move him on, and I think that was a guy that didn't want to be here. When you have guys that don't want to be here anymore, right, it's okay to get rid of them because it helps everything. It helps the locker room. It helps everybody else feel like, good, now we all want to be here. So even if Jesus gets 100% of his fitness back, and he has lingering hamstring issues that cause, problems from time to time, which might be why he's not fit, because he's always sort of struggling with that. It's just not, it's not how you don't get better by bringing back the exact same guys and hoping that they improve. So as for why Seattle thinks that's fantastic, A, they're on a discount, but B, those guys probably don't watch FC Dallas. They're probably basing it on, the reputation of those players in terms of what they were in the past. And if you get Arriola and Jesus from 2020, that's a steal for them and it's going to be great. But those players are 2022, even that sort of 20 to 2022, then they'll look great. But if they get 24 of those versions of those two players, then they're not going to be looking very good.
Yeah, it will create an interesting story if either one or both of those guys go to Seattle and blossom back into the players they were in 2022. And the question will be, is that an indicator of the state of Dallas versus just them as players?
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. Well, we've questioned all along the fitness regime, the health regime, the medical regime here. We don't know squat about it. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a trainer. I don't know. But we see the slate of injuries and we see the guys that struggle.
Yeah.
So one of the things Dallas is changing up a bunch this winter is some of those programs. I'm not privy to the details of those programs. I just hear that they're making some changes. So hopefully for FC Dallas's sake, they can wrap up and clean out some of these problems. If those two guys go to a team that's better at that kind of thing, can get healthy and stay healthy, maybe they will get back to that 2022 form. But Paul's getting, longer in the tooth now. So I don't know that he'll ever get back to where he was before. And Jesus obviously is still very young and very talented. As much as it is physical for him, it's also mental. So he's going to have to mentally recover and be excited to be there on that turf with those guys. And as you pointed out last week, Peter, maybe not being the man might actually help him a little bit. So there's lots of questions surrounding those two moves for that team.
Yeah, I do think watching Seattle this season will be fun because instead of going out and buying a bunch of high-priced foreign talent, they're picking up other teams, whatever the right word is, not discarded parts, but
ex or fringe U.S. national team players.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So,
which Dallas tried and didn't work very well.
Right. That'll be a lot of fun. All right, Arman, before we move on to other things, what was your favorite new MLS roster rule they introduced this week?
The non-expiration of GAM, for sure. Because now, again, like I mentioned in the first iteration, or into introduction, it allows for just different roster building, right? Because instead of just use it or lose it, you can now say, hey, I want to do a multi-year build. It's kind of like you have more NBA roster building storylines versus then an MLS where you kind of said, okay, well, we got to use it. Are we going to even able to use all of it, etc.? Now it's like, hey, do we want to be patient? Hey, do we want to go all in? Hey, do we want to ride with younger players? See what happens. Oh, our players are blossoming. We're having a season where we have Tessman, Pappy, etc. Okay, now we can go and purchase bigger players because we held a bunch of GAM and their cap hits are low. You could do a lot more, I think, fun. And I put this on Blue Sky. I don't know if it's going to be as good for competitive reasons, although it seems like every owner in MLS thinks they can win MLS Cup or something like that. But I think it's going to be great for roster building. It's going to be a lot more fun, and you're going to see a lot more different roster builds, stories, like kind of like you see. I don't think you'll see blatant tanking because you can't tank because there's no pick to tank for. But you'll see, I think, people saying, hey, we're going to try out, play maybe a little bit younger of a lineup, etc. Maybe we can sneak into the playoffs if the playoff format stays the same. Get the home playoff game, get the revenue, call it a day, and then maybe advance for next season, etc. And go for it because we have all this money. I think the non-expiration is super interesting, and it just provides for a different dynamic the league just didn't have, quite frankly, 3 days ago.
All right. Any of the roster rules that either one of you did not like?
I think they're all good, man. And I think they're pumping so much money into this system now that, this is the craziest. You guys have been along longer than me in MLS, but this seems like it's the craziest MLS offseason that I've seen. All these moves are going around. We're seeing Neymar linked with Chicago, crazy stuff going on there. Chicago signing big name players. Atlanta breaking the transfer fee record with their signing, with their potential signing. Then maybe bring back Almiron. The Charlotte bringing back Zaha or bringing Zaha into the fold. It's crazy. All these names going on. It just seems pretty wild.
Buzz, you got any you didn't like?
No, I like all of them, but can I do my favorite one?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So favorite is maybe not the right word, but for a team that probably at best has a 50% hit rate, particularly on the more expensive signings that they make, 2 buyouts per season is huge for FC Dallas. Yep. So it's not like that's a rule I think is fun, but I think that's a rule that'll benefit this club. Because
it's like putting the bolsters in the gutters at the bowling alley.
Yeah, it is because now it's it's going to be painful for the Hunts because it's still their money, but it's going to be less painful for the roster where you won't be handicapped by these Franco Haras or the Paul Deal, not Paul the Deal, as 4 years later, so
or a Pomacall.
Right now is a perfect example where we know. Look, there's all these vibes that Paxton's doing great, and we'll talk about specifically where he is when we get to the training part of the thing. But there's questions there. There's also massive questions about Giovanni Jesus. So the ability to have 2 buyouts, you also have the $900K Sebastian Lletget contract that you might want to get out of potentially, depending on what you're doing in terms of rebuild. So that flexibility for this club in particular is going to be good.
Okay. Well, camp did open on Monday, and there was a whole list of players that were not there.
Yes. Basically the people from South America are all still traveling or working on visas because they're new, that kind of thing. So Ramiro, the new Brazilian guy, was not here. Patrickson Delgado was not here because they just did that deal late. Giovanni Jesus was not in camp, but that's for a different reason entirely.
He's still looking for his leg.
Yeah. Anderson, we have no official ruling yet on that, but we did get that information that that's report to us that he's going to be on season-ending IR. By the way, that's not locked. They don't have to lock that so much later, but that's probably where he'll end up. Anderson Julio's not here yet. Shaq Moore, Nolan Norris, of course, in U.S. camp. Pedrinho, again, South American, is on his way. Pomacall is not in training, but is with the team. He's apparently running on the side and has not added cutting in yet, but is working on changes of pace and acceleration vertically. So that's a positive. And we hear really good vibes coming out of that, but still long way to go. Don't get too excited. And then the other 2 missing were Thomas Pondeca and Carl Sante, who both were loaned out. So those are all the missing pieces. And then there were some fun academy pieces, the academy guys that thus, because of those missing bodies, got some chances. Ian Charles, who's a U18 center back, the best center back at that level physically that can handle MLS. Josh Torquato, who's or Torqueto, I don't know how to pronounce that 100%, is a left back with the U18s. And Landon Hickman, who's a 6, again, a position missing because Romaro's not here, is with the first team. The player that's super, super exciting is the one that got added not for positional needs, but because it's like, holy crap, this kid can ball, is a kid named Sam Seta, who just joined them like 6 months ago from BVB Dallas, the local BVB team. He's just a phenomenally talented wing 9, Brazilian American, just class player. He's a 09. He's a U16, so he's like 15 years old. He's 2009, and apparently has been looking just phenomenal in the small sided games and stuff. So there's a quick rundown of who's there and who's not there.
Very good. I know Dan went to training this week. Any other particular notes out of training that we got back from him?
Yeah, he sent me a couple of things. All reports that we're hearing from everybody is that all 3 of the draft picks are doing really well. Enzo Newman, who's the wing, a young wing, has looked really good. Mohamed Sisset is the center back, who was the 3rd round pick. Apparently looks so good. People are like, can't believe it. And then the Sam Sarver, who's the senior, the 1 4-year player, apparently is a really active, really high pressing, really defensive, like energetic thing that probably will appeal to Quill. The chances of those guys making the team are more about space than anything else. They're probably going to have to play for North Texas initially. Even if they get signed, they probably will get loaned back down. The other thing is that everyone around the team is raving about Diego Garcia, who's the kid who's come up from North Texas, 18, 19 years old. He's an 8 box-to-box guy. Apparently, he's just knocking everybody's socks off and having an amazing camp, which is fantastic, because we've been talking about that kid for a couple of years now and that they needed to sign him. Dan said Petter Musa looked really happy and was out there smiling and looked happy to be here. So no like moping around or looking like he didn't want to be there. That's really good.
Because he saw the Acosta rumor.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe, I would imagine, I cannot imagine that they didn't do this, that they went in and met with him and said, hey, I know we just sold Allen, but here's our plan. Here's the kind of player we're going to get you. Don't worry. I'm sure they had to have those kind of conversations with him and his agent. I guarantee it. John Gall is working with the first team as the coach. He's the North Texas coach, but he's with the first team. Quill's assistant, Matt Watson, who's from New Mexico. He's the one that kind of ran training. Most coaches since Oscar have let, probably Shellis Shellis ran his own stuff, but under Clawlin and Oscar for sure, they usually left their first team assistant, and everybody since has to mostly run training, and that's continuing to be the case with this new Quill assistant. And the team takes off on Sunday. They're going to Algrave, and they'll be at this Marabella Football Center, which is near Benfica a little bit, and they're going to spend some time at Benfica's campus too, and they might even get to scrimmage a Benfica team. So
stay out of the clubs.
Stay out of the clubs. Hopefully nobody gets in trouble. But there's a couple of scrimmages lined up. Hopefully FC Dallas comes through and lets us watch those on stream. I don't know if they will or not, but hopefully that happens. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. It's just hard to tell. So
somebody call Garrett and just tell him to hold his phone up.
Yeah,
on
hold your phone up, Garrett. Yeah, those are your Dan Crooke training report right there.
All right. Very good. Also, I know you're excited because there's a bunch of number changes.
Woo.
You're all
yes, numbers matter. Mark Paz with the one jersey, phenomenal.
Buzz's pants went crazy when he saw some of this stuff.
I'm annoyed that I predicted Laos Abubakar would get to 5. I'm annoyed that Leo Chu got 7 and not Bernie. I thought Bernie deserved the 7, but they gave it to Leo Chu. That's fine. Anderson Julio, I predicted he would be 11, and he is. Shaq Moore, I predicted would be 18, and he is. Pedrinho 20, I predicted that because he would want to be 10. So
what is Ramiro?
Ramiro is 22, which is the number I think he wore in South America, so that's not surprising.
All right.
And Collodi, the new third keeper, Michael Collodi, come up from North Texas. He got the 30, which is the other keeper number. Dallas, the number 30 jersey with FC Dallas has never been worn by anything but a keeper. It's always a keeper. Usually the third keeper, but in this case, Martin Paz had it last time because Jimmy did. So they've now moved Paz up. So numbers for me are so much fun. I love that stuff. And the 10 is vacant. They were going to give it to Allen. So that would have been fun to see that happen, but now they're going to hold that open for whatever comes, I'm sure, in the future. So, and Delgado kept his 6. Now they've signed him back. That was a given one.
Yeah.
And the kids, nobody cares about. They just have whatever random sign numbers. So
Allen didn't want to be here. I'm glad they didn't give him the 10.
Yeah. He would have been, that's crazy.
Okay. So that's all good news. Let's see now the other stuff that's just going on within the league, along with all the rules and everything. Arman has alluded to this. Like the list of players that are starting to leak into the league is pretty mind bending, to be honest with you. And while we're all sitting here really concerned about how good Dallas is going to be, everybody else seems to be charging their batteries. I mean, just go look at what Nico and Austin is doing. I don't know if this is smart. I don't know if this is good, but they've broken their own transfer record 3 times in the matter of 7 days, it looks like.
Yeah, they decided to really go for second division Spanish players and pay some money for them. So, the one they grabbed most recently, anyway.
At least that one.
Yeah, the one. I just think it's funny because that's such a Nico signing. Yeah, they're going for it. They're doing some things. I mean, he's like Armand mentioned those other guys. The Neymar one is nuts because some people think Dallas might be in for Neymar, and I'm like, come on. Danielson destroyed the Hunt's faith in ever signing a player like that again. So Zanata does have a connection to Neymar, though. He was the one that was like the biggest factor in selling Neymar from Santos to Barcelona back in 2013 because he was running Santos then. He was sporting director at Santos.
Can you imagine Neymar and Frisco?
No, I can't. That's why it's ridiculous. People are like, oh, Dallas is without a connection. No, Neymar's not coming to Frisco. No, stop it.
Could you imagine the confused looks on people's faces in Brazil if they tuned into an FC Dallas game and like the shot of the half, like the half deconstructed stadium and
with the lone construction worker watching Neymar play?
Like, what in the world?
That's the thing. Like, even if Dallas was a team that did this kind of thing with the revenue problem, you're not going to do it right now, certainly. And there's the value of the overpay you would have to do to get Neymar does nothing for Dallas. Like if you're Inter Miami or one of the LA teams,
can't sell more tickets.
Yeah, I buy the New York maybe or a Chicago, those major, huge international cities. Listen, Dallas has got a whole lot of international flavor to it. A lot of it's from south of here, but the stadium, as you say, Peter, the stadium is going to be limited for the next couple of years. To me, that kind of hyper buy of a massive name like Neymar, that makes even less sense than a Luciano Acosta does. There's just, to me, there's no way. I just laughed when I read this. I thought Danielson has ruined them on ever signing this ancient Brazilian, mercurial kind of player who in their prime was exciting. But at this point in their stage, you wonder if he's even doing the business in the league he's in now over there. And
no, he's been hurt.
Yeah, right. So
he's barely played in 2 years.
This like, to me, this is like, if you're Chicago and you really need some fire to get, sorry.
Wow, that was great. That was great, bud.
Attention in Chicago, then I can buy it.
Well, yeah, they've got an NFL stadium to fill.
Yeah, I don't buy that in Dallas. Yeah.
No, totally.
But Peter, the names are just nuts, and the money being thrown around is crazy. Like, Atlanta, $20 million. Austin spent $10 million on Brandon Vasquez, $12 million on this guy, etc. There, it looks like Atlanta wants to bring in Almiron as well. Looks like Charlotte with, like I said, with Zaha. There's also some other signings that are like $2-3 million that are popping up left and right. The amount of money and stuff being popped into this league during this offseason, it's insane to me. It's just like, damn.
You know what we're seeing, guys? We talked about this when Messi came to Miami. We talked about how the paradigm in MLS has changed. Are you going to keep up? Are you going to try and keep up with Miami? I know you can't get Messi, but can you at least keep playing, or not? And so these money we're seeing thrown around are these teams that are trying to keep up. They're trying to get some spice. They're trying to they're now knowing we got to spend. So, that's one of the questions you have to add into the Dallas factor is, yes, they want to go back to this DNA. Are they going to try and keep up with the spend? And I don't know. They're gonna have to show us they are, or we're gonna assume that they're gonna go with their developmental ways that fit their coach they just hired and fit the way they do business.
It will look. I'm telling you, everybody, just trust me when I tell you, their willingness to spend will coincide directly with incoming revenue. The model was set when they sold Pappy, and then they turned around and started spending that money. And I believe that will be followed here in the Velasco situation. They made $10 million, although really they lost money on Velasco because they paid $8 million for him and then paid several $1 million in salary. So it's a sunk cost kind of thing. But now they got $10 million in cash. They'll figure out a way to spend that money. But that's just how this club is always going to be operated.
Yeah, and if you look at the usual 3 to 4 year coach build cycle, right? 25, 26, 27, the stadium will be done. It'll be post World Cup. Maybe it's aligning with the schedule change. Maybe when all that goes through, maybe the Hunts are going to then change their fiddle. Maybe this is what's just going to get us through a couple of years with the stadium until they get to that post World Cup bounce. Yeah. And they're going to have all this new revenue ways through the new completed stadium and all the things that are going to be around it. So like there's so many questions around this team right now. It actually is fun for us. There are so many questions.
Armando, is there a favorite signing or potential signing in the league that has caught your eye that you just can't get enough of?
Man,
I know it's not Maxi Urruti to New England.
It's no. That
one was funny because they photoshopped a photo and they photoshopped his head on the body of a guy that wears his socks all the way up over his knees. And we all know Maxi doesn't do that with his socks.
Exactly. I mean, from okay, internally, I love the Jalen Neal thing. I love Jalen Neal. I don't love him, but I like him a lot. Yeah. And I like the way they used him. Man, if Atlanta brings back Almiron, bring the gang back. You have Almiron, you have Saba, you have Moranchuk, the other DP they signed last year. You have Bartosz Schlich, Gregerson. You have this guy, Mateusz Klich, that is on Atlanta's books for $200,000-$300K, but is technically a DP on DC's roster. Like, how is that going to work? And they signed this guy, his name's like Latte Lith or something. I can't remember his last name from, I think, Middlesbrough. And his advanced metrics look pretty crazy for a $20 million transfer. I'm really intrigued by the whole Atlanta United and what they're building towards, etc. I think I know it's a very answer, but I mean, and also see Almiron back. How is that going to be when he's back in Atlanta? If they finish the signing and go through, how is that going to work? And how is are we going to see that Almiron magic that we saw in 2017, 2018 when he was on the team?
What about Chicho and Martinez in San Jose?
Yeah, it's that one's really that was interesting. So I'm interested to see how they work together, right? Like Arango. I mean, speaking of that Arango deal, it was like $700K of GAM across 2 years.
Yeah, they just
Like,
wanted to
not
get
much.
They wanted
Not
to get
much.
him. That was their Jesus.
Yeah, they were just like get out, like essentially. And I think for San Jose, a team. I mean, Buzz, you talk about how Dallas hasn't improved their defense.
Yeah.
I don't really think San Jose's improved their defense either, and they allowed the most goals in MLS. They have had a couple MLS vets here and there, but nothing crazy where I'm like, okay, well, whatever. But it's like they're gonna follow the Galaxy model, which is we don't care how many goals we're gonna allow. We're gonna score a bunch and try to match you with it with their like crazy front line of Pellegrino, Espinoza, Hernan Lopez, and now you have Chicho Arango too. It's and I mean, Lucci probably would have liked to have all those people there as well, which is
How much did Coco Houston get for Coco?
like 3 to 4 million.
Okay,
Is the number.
So Buzz,
I would have bought that player.
yeah. So like,
yeah.
I would love to have that dude in Dallas.
I'd give you 4
You
or
think
5 for
Houston
that
would
guy.
have sold? I don't think he wants to stay in MLS, but I don't know.
I totally buy that. I
Yes.
just think to me, I've been in love with that guy since he came to the league. I think he was one of the best players, if not the best player in CONCACAF last year. Oh, by the way, you guys are vastly underselling Brian Acosta to Nashville as a move this winter.
Underselling what, like how high and far the shots are going to go or something? Is it going to hit somebody in the face again?
Yeah, I'm with you on Almiron. The other player that I saw move that I was like, oh, was Randall Leal.
They got him for nothing too.
I know. That's a guy. I understand he's probably tough to handle, but I would have taken a role, especially like once you had news that are the vibes that you might be going to lose, like Velasco. I think he'd have been great as a stopgap, or as a guy to put in that spot. But maybe you get him as a TAM. Maybe he's a DP. It's like you can put him in there and then you could buy him down in a year or two if you need him.
I mean, Buzz, you know how much DC got him for, right?
Yeah, like next to nothing. They just picked up his contract, didn't they?
No, DC just is. So when you go on waivers, you're still responsible for like the team. So Nashville's still responsible for the part of the contract that the team. So DC came in and said, we want to pay him like $100K. We will only take $100K of his budget charge. So he went to DC from what I've been reading from Stephen Goff for like $100K, like nothing.
So all that hidden stuff aside, his salary was only $1 million. I would have taken him at that number because that's a number that you can right now. You could have him be a TAM player, or you could have him be a DP. Like you slot him into Velasco's DP spot. Right now, he costs you very little. You ride him in that spot until you need that DP spot, and then that's an easy TAM buy down or GAM buy down. Use them either one, and then remember they have a lot of GAM and make him a player under that limit and make him just a TAM player. So like. A player that I think would have really quickly been the right kind of fit to go inside in terms of that way replacing. Can play on the wing, but also contend both. Again, like Velasco, a really good number that's easy to digest, not a bad contract for inside the league. Nashville got rid of them because they were in contract hell. They were like Dallas. They had just absolutely brutal cap situation and had a gut. So that's why he was waived and out there. So like that's a player I would have grabbed too, in addition to Coco, who I like even more.
See, this is where all this discussion is what makes this offseason for Dallas so interesting, because there is such a huge opportunity for Zanata and co to become heroes. But there's yet maybe even a bigger possibility that they all look like ding-dongs. Yeah. Because there's so much available out on the market. They have so many things available to them in terms of money and GAM and blah, 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 blah. And they got so many things to fix. If they fail to do that, it's all on them. And that's what we'll all be able to look back and give grades on.
Not to spend an analogy, but show me the money, right? Show me you can do it. You've set up to do the moves. Now do the moves, do the business. Let's see what you can do in terms of bringing in pieces and make this team better.
Speaking of Dallas players, one that never played for the senior team, but is doing very well for himself over in the EFL in England, Charlie Kelman, who used to play for one of Dallas's ECNL
teams.
Yep. He's been floating around England for, I think his dad brought his family over here, and his dad was a coach or something.
I think he's a scout.
And
something like that.
Yeah, and then Charlie went back to England and has been floating around different teams. Well, he is currently for the second time playing for Leyton Orient in the League One, which, by the way, Leyton Orient is actually owned by a DFW resident and friend of the Kick Around, Kent Teague. They won their FA Cup game over Derby this week and now have to play Man City. And the reason why I bring this up is that Charlie scored in the game, their one goal in the game, and he also scored their fifth PK just before their keeper saved a one in sudden death, and they won that game. So good to them, and good to see a Dallas tie in the FA Cup over there.
Yeah, Charlie's a 2001. He came through the FC Dallas ECNL. He's a little bit undersized, about 5'9" or so, but he's a 9. He's a 9 style striker. So that's the class that had Tanner Tessman in it. Johan Gomez, who's Jonathan Gomez's brother, who is a 9 and was the 9 for the academy. So I couldn't tell you why a player that's playing in the third division and is owned by QPR was not in the academy. I have no idea. But that's just, I wanted to give a little bit of context about the kind of players he came through with, the class he was in. And Malik Henry Scott was another 9 that was in that team who we just saw as a homegrown last year, and they declined his option. So those are some guys that were in the club at that time that he was competing with.
Yeah. Kelman is having a really good season for Orient, who now I think are undefeated in 11. So, and I think Kent is freaked out that they might get promoted at the championship.
So he's about 23. So
yeah, very good.
Lots of crew head.
Botafogo is one of the other teams also coming back to the Dallas Cup this year.
Yep, they're confirmed. They're like the 5th or 6th team now that's confirmed. So that's a really obviously fantastic Brazilian club that's had a really great year. Just another nice piece for the Dallas Cup Super Group. And
they've announced a exhibition match between North Texas and the new Texoma FC, who are playing in USL 1.
Yeah, Texoma dropped their schedule. They are in USL 1, which is the same level as MLS Next Pro that North Texas SC is in. North Texas SC used to be in USL 1, so those are the same level comparatively.
That's the league. That's the league. Quill won with the
Quill
team.
Won the championship in the North Texas inaugural season in that league. So that's the level that team's going to be at. We don't know with any players yet, but that'll be fun to see that game and see what kind of team they have and see what kind of team North Texas has.
Man, that crest that they have at Texoma, I love it. It's good. Fantastic. It's and it's like a perfect. Very random, but like it's like right off Sherman, right? So like you could go there and go to like Oklahoma to a casino if you wanted to or something like that. That's the only thing you could do, like 30 minutes away from there. So it's like I'm very interested to see how like another team kind of in the area in the Metro, because obviously we know about USL Garland and stuff, but another team that's going to start this year in the Metroplex, not the Metroplex, but a little bit north of us, how they're going to do.
So the real fast blurb on the logo you just mentioned is the 2 birds on there are 2 birds that live along the Red River, basically right along where they are, north and south of that, and that's kind of their area. So that's why that.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I need a jersey when they get it.
Have they revealed their kits for this year?
No, they have not. I think they're doing a similar deal. Like if you get a season ticket, you get a jersey, that kind of bit that some of those teams at that level do. Apparently, there's been a delay till February on the kits getting in, so they've not showed it yet.
Okay. All right. Well, wow, we jammed through a lot of stuff. Arman, you did great as a late substitute call-up. Good Lord.
I feel super warmed up right now. Like I could go play like 90 right now or something. More like 25 like soccer, whatever, city futsal or something before I pull something and limp off. But no, thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. It's always super fun to talk.
Your third degree's John Duran, and Dan Crooke is Ollie Watkins. He's like sitting on the bench staring concerned over his position on the podcast after a stellar showing by you.
I literally tapped my right arm before I called you.
Dan is the GOAT, man. Dan taught me everything I know. I love him to death. I'll never replace him. Maybe.
By the way, here's the real question: who's going to finish the trifecta of David Lynch and Bob Uecker?
Oh, famous deaths. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
It's going to be a fascinating trifecta of whoever the third one is.
That would be, yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. Yeah, too bad. All right, well, boys, well done. Thank you very much, Arman. It was great having you on again.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Buzzard, well done.
Thanks, man.
And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. Yes, we will be back next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Dan, where'd you go?
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.